Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today grew up trading romance novels with her mom like sacred artifacts, rereading dog-eared paperbacks until the spines gave out, and she never expected to write a book herself until a small town girl with too much pride and not enough sleep marched into her head and refused to leave. That girl became Katie, and however much or little poured out like a love song she didn't know she'd been humming for years. She's been married since 1997 to her first real love, a man with enough patience to weather her moods and enough instinct to see her clearly, entirely, and always. His steady presence is the best part of her life, even if he can't fold a fitted sheet to save his soul. Her words, not mine. They live in a small town in New Brunswick with a cat, a dog, and an ever expanding list of inside jokes. All three of her housemates are male, so she's dramatically outnumbered and fighting the patriarchy one sarcastic eyebrow at a time. And
Yes.
she's writing more books in the Ashby Lake series, a place where love is stubborn, slow burning, and just wild enough to make one feel like at home. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, fellow author Tasha Zima. Tasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gabe, for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you about my books and about your book, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but it is on my next to read. It looks really good.
Awesome, Tasha. Awesome. I'm so excited to have you here and to talk about your books as well. And speaking of your books, without spoiling too much, what can people expect from your series?
So they all take place in or around a small town in Ontario, and they are all about healing in some sort of way. So I'm not a big fan of traditional romance where it's formulaic. I like to go a little bit deeper than that. So I like my characters to be more well-rounded and in depth. So
Mm,
I love them. Hopefully, other people love them too.
nice. Very, very nice. Now, before we dive into the creation of this series of yours, let's talk a little more about you as a person and as the author. So, from your bio, it's very clear to see that reading and the literary world has been a part of you for a very, very long time. Your
Yes.
mom had a very special relationship with trading romance books and just reading until the spines gave out. And I love how in your bio, how the idea of this character and the world this character belongs just sort of popped into your head. With that said, would you consider that to be your definitive aha moment that really put you on the path to become a writer, or was it a different moment altogether?
It actually was a different moment altogether when I decided. So I've been writing for a really long time since
Ah,
I was really little, but I never shared it with anyone. Well, besides my mom. And then one of the stories that I wrote, I thought, oh, this is pretty good. And I shared it with a couple of friends, and they're like, this is really good. And after I'd finished that story, that's when Katie came in, and it was like a whole book that just went from start to finish. And now there's 3 books in that series. There's going to be 5 in
ah,
total. But I write a lot. It is my entire life these days. I don't sleep a lot. I'm at that time of my life where sleep is sort of a vague notion. So I'm usually up pretty early, and on the weekends I'm writing constantly as well. I think I'm trying to catch up to the years that I missed writing and publishing. So
mm,
I'm a little bit manic at the moment.
okay, all right, all right. So now let's talk about the creation of Katie's world and the universe that she resides in. So let's start at the very beginning. So when Katie sort of appeared in your head and you sort of
Yes.
got an inkling of this story, did you have or did you write a very clear, distinct outline for the overall series, or would you say you're more of what's the word?
I'm a pantser.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah, 100%. So like I said, I didn't expect it to be a whole book. I thought it was just going to be like another story. And then I just kept writing, and I'm like, oh, this part's really good. And oh, if I do this, and it just developed from there. And it honestly took me probably about 3 months of going back and forth and redoing it and rewriting it. But it was so much fun that I can't stop now.
Awesome. And when you began writing this book and overall this series, did you have a ritual or routine that kept you centered to make sure that you would finish on time, or did you not have a ritual or routine?
Like I said, I didn't know that I was writing a book, so it was just I'm just writing, and this is fun, and I'm going to share it with the two friends again, and then it got bigger and bigger, and then suddenly it was 300 and some odd pages, so it just grew organically, I guess, which was very cool. Yeah, although the second and third book grew out of that quite easily because there were parts I couldn't put in, so I chopped those out and put them into the next book.
Nice. Now, as you mentioned earlier, you've been writing for a very, very long time. So when you
Yes.
began writing this book in particular, what really surprised you about not just writing this new series of new book, but how your writing has changed over the years?
Oh gosh. So when I first started writing, it was mostly other people's worlds, like fan fiction. I didn't know that's what it was back then because that was easy, right? Somebody's already created the world for you, and you just either continue the characters that they had or you've created characters in there. And I found that to be really fulfilling, especially as I got older. TV shows that ended really badly. I would sometimes write those, finish the stories the way I thought they should be finished. And so when I wrote this series, I was really surprised that I could create my own world. And I mean, it's a very small world. It's a small town in Ontario. It's 10,000 people. But, the fact that I could see it in my head, and I knew that this is where the cafe is on the street, and this is where, people go fishing on the lake, and that was very cool to create that. And I didn't think that I was capable of it, but apparently here I am.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, in regarding to the characters in this series, how did you make them feel authentic and yet complex? And the reason I ask this is that as we're writing characters for different books, we want to make sure that it makes sense for them to exist in the world that they are residing in and not being an archetype or a trope-like character. So for Katie and the others, how did you make them feel like real people?
I took some parts of myself for Katie and some parts of people that I have met in my life. Of course, you always do that with characters. But for Katie in particular, there was a part of my life where I was working 3 jobs. Money was an issue for doing things. So there's one part of the book where she goes out to dinner and she looks at the menu and she knows she can only afford like soup on the menu. And so she has this big awkward moment with the male character. And that part was like, I remember that. I remember having that sort of awkward moment. So I put those things that I knew were true for myself in there in the moments. And I think it really helped round her out as to not be just, oh, it's just another poor girl who meets a rich guy and they fall in love and happily ever after. She doesn't need to be saved. She just exists already.
Nice. Now, this actually is a fan question that one of my viewers wanted to ask, and there'll be a few fan questions sprinkled throughout.
Ooh, okay.
And this kind of goes into something that you mentioned earlier a while ago. I think it was off camera, but how your stories did not want to be, the traditional or the market style of romance. And they ask, why is it that you think a lot of authors are choosing to write different takes on the market style romance? Do you believe that that style of romance has been oversaturated too much and people are looking for new outlets for romance books?
I grew up on those romance books, and they have a fond place in my heart. But when you look at authors like, oh gosh, Barbara Cartland, who I think she wrote 140 books in her lifetime, but they were really just 3 stories that she recycled. They were good stories, but after a while you caught on. And I just didn't want to be a person who recycled things. I wanted something to be true and something that could connect with people nowadays. A lot of the formulaic writing, again, love them because there is something very special about knowing where the story is going to go. It feels comforting. But when you have something that's true, it stays with you. And it's something that you reread because it means something. Whereas the formulaic ones, like I said, they're a lot of fun. They're beach read. You sit there and you finish them in an afternoon. But I wanted something a little bit deeper than that.
Right. Very, very true. And I will say this, I've been branching out of my comfort zone in terms of like romance books. I don't typically read those as often. They're not my go-to, but I will dabble in romance here and there. And this is actually a big question, which I am really eager to hear your thoughts on. This is from another fan who's been watching a few specific episodes of the channel,
Okay.
and they ask, I'm going to summarize because it's a very, very long question. They're pretty much asked a question that my viewer asked. And this is actually a very, very interesting one because I've had a lot of other guests on the show who have talked about this. And this viewer wants to know, Tasha, in your opinion, what constitutes a romance novel as opposed to a novel that has a romance plot?
That's a really tough question these days because it's blurred now. So a romance novel used to be they meet, they fall in love, they argue, they break up, they get back together happily ever after. That used to be pretty much the standard. Now it's mixed up a bit. You still see, if it's a true romance, you should have that arc of it is a meet, they fall in love, something happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be a breakup or an argument, but something happens, and then there's a happily ever after. So you get that sort of nice wave that happens. If it's a book that has romance in it, you won't get that full arc. You'll get the love part, but you won't get the full story of it. And I think that's what sets the romance apart these days. But again, it's so blurry. Some of the stuff that I've read has been fantastic. Some not so good. You always get a few that aren't so great, but most of it has been really good, and they're blurring the lines between all of those things. And I think that's fantastic because it should be what's true to the writer and to the person who's reading it. It doesn't necessarily have to follow a formula.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting because I've had a lot of guests on the show that have talked about this, specifically romance authors, and I've been very eager to hear that. And thank you, Tasha. Thank you for providing your insight onto this discussion. And speaking of discussions, when you began writing this book, going into it after getting a very clear idea of the type of story that you wanted, what was sort of the goal you planned for Katie and the other characters in this book? And ultimately, what was the promise you're making, not just to new readers who would pick this book up as their introduction into your style of writing, but your long-standing fans and readers who have been with you since probably your first publications?
So let's see if I can unpack that. That was a lot in one question. So my promise, I think you said, to my readers is that we're going to explore more than just romance, and you're going to have characters that have depth. So Katie isn't just some, like I said, poor girl who needs to be rescued. She's got a full backstory. She has a motivation. She gets a surprise invitation at the end of the first book that blows up the rest of her life, which is really cool. But when I started writing it, I wanted to show that women don't have to be rescued. And I'm of an age but women being minimalized and told they can't do things. Like Katie, she grew up as a mechanic. She's tough. She works on a farm. She works a whole bunch of other jobs. And just because some guy wandered into her life, she wasn't willing to give up any of that stuff, even though he could make her life easier. So I wanted to be more, I guess, feministic. Is that a word? more, I guess, feminist oriented, where people are equal, and
Mm,
partnerships have to be equal. And as much as it's lovely to have the fairy tales, life isn't like that. And I didn't want to write it like that.
very true. Very, very true. Now, another fan question, probably one of my favorite fan questions to ask. Do you have a favorite scene that you've written in your book, as well as a challenging scene that you found difficult to bring to life?
So, yes, gosh, so many. So, my newest book, which comes out next week, a little plug, The Brave One, that one was the most challenging book I've written. It's about trauma forward and informed story. So it's about a woman who went through something very difficult and she's learning how to love again. And some of the stuff that I had so much fun writing, and it sounds weird to say that, were some of the humor that I put into the book to alleviate the heaviness of it. And there's one part where her and the guy she's seeing are sexting back and forth. And
Mm,
he's in the hardware store and he's looking for something, and she sends him a really dirty text. Well, actually not that dirty, but a semi-dirty text. And I laughed through that whole part because it was just so awkward and human that
mm.
I love that. And then in the same book, one of the hardest things that I wrote was when she finds out that the person that she put in jail is getting out of jail.
Ooh.
And she has a complete breakdown and she hides in her closet with her blanket and her bottle of water, and she calls her therapist. And that was a tough scene to write.
Man, oh man. And kind of falling in line with that, as authors, we're always going to have days where we don't write or we don't know what to write or can't bring it down, bring it about on the page or on the computer. So for you, Tasha, how do you deal with the dreaded writer's block?
So I had so much backstory stuff to write that it didn't happen for a long time, but it happened not so long ago in August, where I was like, I have no idea what to do next. Like, I don't want to finish the book that I'm writing. I don't want to do any of this stuff. So I reached out to some author friends and I'm like, do you guys have any suggestions? And one of them was like, well, why don't you take one of your characters and just do like a silly scene? Like just something that they would never do, just something completely off brand. And just write that for a fun part, like change it to something fun and silly. And that really did help because then you're starting to think more creatively again and outside of the box of what you put yourself into, right? And I found that to be a lot of fun. And it really did help.
Very, very nice. And now I get into a series of questions which I call the reflective questions. And the first one is, of course, what does it mean to be an author in the digital age? Because let's face it, the industry has changed in the last 20 years alone. As one of my friends perfectly said it, it's never been more easy to get something published in today's digital age, but it's never been more difficult to market ourselves in the digital age, which is absolutely true. Social media has been a boon for us authors, independent, hybrid, or trad. And you and I both know that it's also a great place to meet other authors and build a community and network. But on the other side, social media can be very emotionally draining, very tiring, and also be a hub for negativity, trolls, hate speech, and what have you, and could also heighten our imposter syndrome and social anxiety of either promoting our books or getting people excited for it. It's not easy. It is very, very intimidating. So, for you, Tasha, in your experiences, what has disciplined you that no matter what happens, you're still going to not only write stories, but you're also going to share stories?
So again, I'll do my best to answer all of those questions in one. So I am just an indie author. I did send out a couple of queries, but just the waiting to hear back from agents,
Mhm.
I couldn't do it. I sat there and I was like, okay, I'm checking my email like every 10 minutes. Like, when I'm going to hear back from these people? And of course, you never do, right? Either you're accepted or you're not. And so after the third one, I'm like, why am I putting myself through this torture? I can do this myself. Although at the time when I first published my first book, I honestly thought you put it out there and suddenly, everyone knows who you are. I didn't realize there was marketing or that you had to, go on Instagram or any of that stuff. So I've been learning fast on how to do things, and it's been fascinating, but it's hard. It does take a lot out of you. I've been blessed with having people be very supportive. I've been very lucky with, I don't think I've had, except on TikTok, which I'm not a fan of. I'm much for Instagram. TikTok's a little more difficult. Those you get more trolls on. Instagram seems to be a little bit of a softer landing for me for that. So I haven't had very many negative or any negative experiences, but I can see how it could get there. I think I've just not known enough to have those yet. That makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. And now this next question, I'm also very intrigued to hear your thoughts on. So context for this question. I've been doing this show now going on 6-7 years.
Wow.
On total of YouTube and Spotify and Anchor. And when I look back on my YouTube career alone, I've only been doing YouTube for about maybe 2 years. My first ever episode was December 22nd of 2022, which is absolutely crazy and insane. And with all the guests I've had over the years, especially in this year alone, a lot of them began their careers professionally during the COVID years.
Mm-hmm.
And this has sparked a new term of COVID authors. And when talking with these guests, I began to have this really internal discussion of, because of the lockdowns, were we in or are we in a golden age? Some people say that we are. Some people say that we aren't. More so, people believe we're in an iron age. And the reasoning for that is, yes, during the lockdown, a lot of people went back into themselves and really rediscovered a passion of theirs or found a new passion. And once things got a little bit better, the floodgates opened and the market was just flooded with new talent, which is good. But they argue, and I also now believe it too, that the market has been overly saturated between those that just created something just to make something quick, as opposed to those that truly want to carve out a career in the industry, whether that's the illustration world, the publishing world, or the narration world. And thus people believe we are in an iron age. But Tasha, I would like to hear your thoughts on it. Do you believe, in your opinion, and based upon your own experiences and your interactions, that are we in a golden age, or are we leading towards an iron age, or possibly even going forward with the rise of AI trickling down to the publishing industry, a dark age?
I'm an optimist. Very much, always have been. And I think we're actually going into like an age of Aquarius, really. With the rise of AI, what's going to happen, and how I think it's going to happen, is the publishing houses, they're not going to survive, right? They're not making enough money. The big breakouts are harder to get because there's so much in the market that people are overwhelmed with choices. And where AI is going to come in is going to be the recommendations and the filtering out of the stuff that people are looking for. And so what's going to happen is the books that people are writing should find the audiences easier if we set up the AI to do it correctly. Because the publishing houses can't do that anymore. Again, there's too much bleed into the different genres, like romantasy, dark romantasy. You've got, just plain old contemporary romance. You've got your historical fantasy. Is it
fantasy, historical fiction?
Yeah, historical fiction. All of those bleeding together makes it very hard for traditional publishing houses to know how to categorize things. And so they can't sell them properly. But with AI and the capabilities that'll happen with that is people will be able to say, okay, I'm looking for a really awesome story about Rome, but I don't want it to be exactly Rome. I want it to have something else, but that's the elements
Right.
I'm looking for. And then your books would come in, right? And then for me, it'd be like, oh, I'm looking for stories that touch people, that maybe make me cry and laugh and feel everything, and something that's set in Canada. Oh, here you go. These are the books there. Whereas a publishing house now, you have to go by the cover, the blurb, and we're not set up to do that anymore. Like, do you want to read the back of a book before you buy it? No, you're going by the cover.
That's true. I will admit to that. I have gone by the cover, and if the cover intrigues me, then I go by the blurb on the back, which is very, very true. And that actually goes now into what I like to call the marketing side of being an author, which is probably my favorite segment of questions in the interview. So, as a little icebreaker, Tasha, as you mentioned before, you are an indie author. Now,
Yes.
when you first began your publishing career, what really surprised you about the publishing market as an indie author? And looking back on your career, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of marketing and promoting your books?
I'm not sure. I think I'm still too new to make a really informed decision about what I would do differently. I think I did read an awful lot about marketing, about, for your first book, don't spend any money on the marketing because it's not going to go anywhere. So I didn't. I'm kind of regretting that sometimes. And then other times I'm like, well, at least you didn't spend any money. But I think the things that I should have spent money on and that I'm saving up to spend money on are like covers that are done by artists, right? Like all of my covers are AI because I don't know, one, how to talk to an artist. I don't know how to say, oh, no, I want this to be this or this to be that. To me, that's a very difficult thing to say because somebody's put their life into making this for me. And how do I correct them? I just haven't quite grappled with that. And the other part is, of course, the cost, right? Like making money as an indie author. Luckily, I have a full-time job already. But the actual money that you make is so little until if you make it big or not. But I'm not really that interested in making it big. I just want to make a good product for people to read, right? Like
That is
that's my
very, very true. Absolutely. And I will say this, I'll probably mention this afterwards. For viewers who are looking for covers, this is not a plug, but this is just a big shout out. Get Covers. As an indie author, I have used Get Covers a lot. And again, this is not a sponsor plug or anything. I have just used them a lot as a very, very loyal customer. They are super, super affordable and very, very inexpensive. And that's what I've learned as an author too, finding the right company to make my covers, because as an indie author, you do have to be, money conscious because everything is all on us. So for any author or any person looking to make covers or get them done professionally, Get Covers is an incredible, incredible company. And I actually had a chance to speak with the marketing director of Get Covers, and we actually had an interesting discussion, which I'm going to ask you, Tasha,
Yep.
and that's, of course, knowing your audience. And we had a really fascinating discussion of, how do you know your audience? And in that discussion, he pretty much said, working with covers, you really have to figure out, okay, if you're writing this certain book, what are the things that people look for on the cover? Like if it's a romance fantasy, almost every romance fantasy has a few things. There's a sword on the cover. There's either some flowers. There's maybe a crown, maybe some dark or maybe light or maybe gold colors. Those always draw people in. And there are different books that have that, but just from the cover alone, you get a sense. And it's this balancing act of, are you going to be marketing towards your preferred reader and audience, or are you going to be marketing for people similar to you who enjoy those kinds of stories? So for you, Tasha, do you have a good idea of your audience, and how difficult was it to really understand who you're writing for?
So I primarily write for myself. I want to write a book that I will enjoy reading. And in fact, sometimes I go back and I read things, especially if I'm writing the sequel. I'll read the books that I wrote already, and I'm like, I wrote that. Holy crap! I didn't know I could do that. So ideally, it's probably someone in my age group, in their 50s, and probably, although ideally, it would be younger, but it's probably going to be somebody in their 50s. And as for the covers, gosh, romance covers go from everything from like a watercolor wash to some pretty explicit covers.
Yes.
And you have to kind of find the balance of what kind of person are you trying to attract, right? So, I mean, my first cover that I did for one of my books, I don't know if this will show up, will it show up? Is like a watercolor kind of thing. And that one, I wasn't that happy with. I redid it in with models, which was kind of cool. But I wasn't that happy with this one because it doesn't really tell. It tells a story, but it's a little too soft. For what this book is, that's a wild ride, that one. Whereas this one that I did, the fireworks, there we go.
All right.
This one is more of a very soft kind of story, so the cover fit better, and that's the sort of person.
Okay.
But as you write, you sort of learn what you want to do, and then you have to think of like how you want to market it. And yeah, you're right. It is really difficult to find the right cover to go. And I've looked at the Get covers for that, and I think there are probably the people that I'm going to end up going with when I get a few dollars saved up. But one day these will all be redone. But I just got my ISB number, so I have to redo all of them anyways.
Nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
And also going forward, not only just writing for our audience, but also finding our voice as an author, which is also very challenging. And I remember talking with a very good friend of mine, and he pretty much gave this perfect analogy, is that, we see a lot of books that have, well, maybe not analogy, is probably not the right word, but a good example. He said that we've seen on a lot of books the tagline, the next so-and-so, the next J.K. Rowling, the next George R. R. Martin, the next Stephen King. As readers, that draws us in. And we instantly think it's going to be like this. But we never really considered that, how does the author feel about that title? Because we don't want to be considered or be similar to anyone else in the sense of trying to be them. We don't want to be the next so-and-so. It's okay if people say that to us. I mean, that is a huge confidence and a huge morale booster. But that shouldn't be the thing that authors strive for, to be the next so-and-so. It's this fine line of our individuality and understanding the stories that we want to write and the genres that we're getting ourselves into, because each genre has a certain expectation. And at the end of the day, when people pick up your book, you want them to hear your voice, not someone else. So, Tasha, how did you really uncover your voice as an author?
I don't know that I had anything to uncover. I think it's just the way that I write. I think it's just from the volume of stuff that I've written over my lifetime. It just evolved naturally. But when you're talking about having that comparison on the front covers, that's always worried me. Because Amazon, if you go to Amazon, they recommend that you say, oh, it's like this book. Or if you read this person, then you'll like this stuff. And I always have a hard time putting that on my books. Because again, like what if the person who wrote that book doesn't agree with that? Aren't you stealing something from them a little bit? You're trying to ride on their coattails a bit. I want to be found on my own, hopefully.
Right.
Well, I mean, if that's even possible anymore. But yeah, like I think it's something to consider, that you have your own voice. It's okay to be in the same genre as a person, but to say that you're comparable or a direct comparison, I think, yeah, you're right. It's wrong.
Very, very true. Very, very true. And as we're almost nearing the end, the last 10 minutes of this amazing interview, Tasha, we're going to do something a little bit different, something I haven't done in a while, and that is the series of rapid fire fan questions.
Okay.
So the first fan question is, which is easier to write, a love scene or a conflict scene?
Love scene.
All right. Which is more difficult, an emotional scene or an action scene?
Oh, I'm terrible at action scenes.
All right.
Terrible.
The senses or writing for the mind?
I think writing for the senses is more important because then you're immersed in the book. You're feeling it with the characters. You're not just watching it from a distance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, this is a very, very good question. I don't think I've gotten this one in a while. Least favorite trope that is in every genre of book. And I'm going to make this geared towards your genre of writing.
Least favorite trope. I think my least favorite has to be the forced proximity, because there's always options, right? You
Right.
know, and it's so funny because one of my books actually does have a forced proximity in it, but that's from a plane crash, so I give it a pass. But if it's a like a hotel room where they have to share a bed, or which I find that a little difficult to actually logic out.
Okay.
That's what I have the problem with. Not the actual trope itself. Like some of them can be quite amusing, but the logic of it, of how do you get there?
Right. Very, very true. Next one, and ooh, another good one. Favorite theme to showcase in a book?
I think my favorite theme is, like, for my writing, is healing, like and real life. Like I try to make it more real for what I like to read. Probably my favorite themes are something to do with sci-fi dystopian. Is these days I've read so much really good stuff that I get excited about it, and I wish I could write it.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh, okay. This person asks 3 questions.
Okay.
I'm going to combine them together, and they kind of all mean the same thing. They ultimately ask, for you as an author, when do you know when to stop writing and know when a story is finished and satisfying?
That's really hard to know. Usually you feel it in your gut. Like you're just like, you put your hands down, you're like, that's it, I'm done. But when you're writing a series, where to break the story to go into different books, that's really hard, because you've got this continuation and you're like, okay, but I think it should end here. And that's where I have a hard time. Is like, one of my books I think is like 300 pages, one's 250, and I think the other one's like 400, and they should be spaced better than that. But I'm learning how to do that, but it's hard.
Very, very nice. And let's see, we're going to have one last rapid fire question before I get to the final 2 questions. Ooh, this is a good one. I actually like this one. This viewer asked, if your book or books were made into a movie, who would you cast as the lead?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I know, because most of my authors are in, most of my characters are in their 20s, like, and I don't think I know any actors that in that age group. I don't know. That's really tough. Like, if they were older, I would have a few, like Rachel McAdams, and
I can see that. I can see that.
But she's, she could probably do it because she's very talented, but there'd be a lot of either AI smoothing or makeup involved for that, because she's not 22 anymore.
Absolutely. Well, what director would you want to make an adaptation of your book?
Oh, I was going to say Ridley Scott, but no, that would be a whole different thing. I would probably say, like probably Shonda Rhimes. One of the big, romance ones. Penny Marshall, if she still does them.
Oh, that's a good one too.
But I don't think she does movies anymore. I'm old. What can I say?
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. And now we arrive at the final 2 questions of this amazing interview, Tasha, and they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
So we talked about a lot of things in this interview, from your journey as an author, your favorite moments, scenes, what you've learned about the industry thus far, and will continue to learn down the road. At the end of the day, what do you want people to take away from your writing, as well as what is your advice to other authors who want to get into this industry?
So I would like them to take away feeling something, that there's some depth and that they actually connected with my characters. And I think that's true for any author. You just want to know that what you did meant something to someone. And advice, just do it. It's fun. It's empowering. You feel amazing. You feel terrified. It's hard, but it's worth it, because it is so awesome when someone says, I read your book and I really, really loved it. And it makes you cry.
That is very, very true. Oh, and I would be remiss if I did not bring this up. A bonus question. What is your favorite review that you've gotten as an author?
I think it'd be the one from Kevin, our friend Kevin Goodson. He read my book, The Making of a Storm, and he wrote like a page and a half of beautiful, detailed one. And I think the part that I loved the most was he gasped in places of my book. And I think that just made me feel like, oh, you got it. Like you really got it. So yeah, that's the one.
Awesome. Awesome. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to my friend Tasha for coming on the show, and we wish her the very best with her series. Now, before we end, Tasha, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And can you restate to the viewers and listeners your next book, which is releasing very soon?
You bet. So you can find me on Instagram at Zima Writes, Zima.writes. And I have a website, www.tashazima.ca, not .com.ca. And my book that's coming out November 19th is The Brave One. And I hope everyone will check it out. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, Tasha. No problem. I'll link all that down below in the description of this video. And also, as a final note, viewers and listeners, if you've been following on my social media, I am going to be at the Orange County Book Fair this Saturday. Yes, it is going to be raining cats and dogs, but we're going to be there rain or shine. So I'll be signing with Mystery Inc. books from 2 to 3, as well as being part of a panel lineup of fantasy authors at 4 o'clock on the third stage. The event is completely free. You can go to the website at OC Book Fair or just type it up in the search, and you'll get all the information you need of where to park, where vendors are going to be at, and so forth. So until next time, thank everyone for joining us for another amazing author interview. A huge thank you to my friend Tasha for coming on the show. Wishing her the very best on her journey with her books. And as always, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, asking you to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date. The latest episodes coming out this week and the next couple of weeks. And until next time, have a wonderful day, everybody. Talk to you later.